There you
So,
go.
all right, on chapter 5, Bitcoin and credit of the Satoshi papers. Hey, welcome back. We had a little break there. We got busy with life as we do, but today we're going to move on to the next essay here. As I mentioned, chapter 5, Bitcoin and credit by Jack Watt in the Satoshi papers, Reflections on Political Economy After Bitcoin, edited by Natalie Smolinski. Chapter 5, we've already read 4 essays. Lucas and I are in agreement. This is a phenomenal collection. As with the prior essays, this essay is academic in caliber in the best sense. The author, Jack Watt, I had not heard of him before, but he is an entrepreneur and writer whose focus is Austrian economics and monetary theory. His writing is featured on Mises.org. He co-founded the Bitcoin-focused company SOV BTC and is a professional pilot. And it says his writer is focused on Austrian economics. This essay, Bitcoin and Credit, if you are interested in Austrian economics, the taxonomies it creates, the way that it talks about money and economics, this essay is excellent for that. I'm going to give a little summary here like we usually do, and then Lucas and I are going to dissect it a bit. And I'm super excited to hear Lucas's take on this. I haven't got it yet, and this is more in Lucas's wheelhouse than mine. Bitcoin and credit. Credit's such an abstract thing, and I'm more kind of a humanities guy. But that's what we do. When you consider Bitcoin, you have to think about credit. So this essay, like I said, called Bitcoin and Credit, and I'm just going to read the last paragraph so you can see where we're going to go. So the last paragraph, the Bitcoin community now faces the challenge of designing and implementing Bitcoin-based credit instruments. How these are adopted and used around the world is arguably one of the most significant economic questions of our time. So, Bitcoin-based credit instruments, one of the most significant questions of our time. That's what this essay is going to maintain. This essay is very rich, as I mentioned, especially for those interested in Austrian economics, that school of theory, and its application to Bitcoin. There's an entire section we might not get to on Mises' taxonomy of money, and maybe we'll hash it out a bit more in conversation. But without going into too far in the weeds, kind of in that aspect, in the summary, here are the main points of the essay. Bitcoiners sometimes have a problem with the whole even idea of credit, but the problem is not with credit issuance as such. As Jack Watt notes, markets everywhere exhibit perennial demand to channel savings from savers to producers, who in turn invest that capital into productive activity that drives economic growth. So just like on a base level, credit does seem to be very integrated into the way our economy has functioned. And so Bitcoin does seem to need to be able to incorporate some notion of credit. The problem is also not kind of necessarily with fractional reserve banking as such. Fractional reserve banking, which again is a method for loaning where only a fraction of the savings deposit is retained, the rest is loaned out. The problem of credit, or what makes credit problematic, is rehypothecation. So that's a great vocab word. Put that on your vocab. That's one of the takeaways from this essay. If you take away nothing else from this convo, rehypothecation, and another phrase, fiduciary media, which is another term we're going to get to. What is rehypothecation? Basically, money or something that claims to be money being in two places at the same time. That's kind of the simplest explanation. Example, $1 on a bank's ledger can be simultaneously recorded as one part of a customer's account and then lent out by the bank to another customer and used by that other customer as collateral for a loan they receive from yet another party. So that's an example from the essay of money or something claiming to be money being in multiple places at the same time. That's rehypothecation. So in rehypothecation, rehypothecated money becomes something that Austrian economics, or at least Mises, according to this essay, refers to as fiduciary media. That's the second vocab word that I think is great and kind of helps understand this essay a lot. Fiduciary media is money. You could define it as a money substitute. It's a type of, calling it kind of derogatorily media instead of money, fiduciary media. This is a money substitute which is used in excess of the actual money supply. A substitute which is going to enable some more liquidity, some more usage of money-like things. That's fiduciary media. The increase in the money supply with the addition of money substitutes, fiduciary media, leads to boom bust business cycles, that the kind of cycles that we have that are seem to be inherent and integral to our economic system. The issuance of fiduciary media drives credit expansion, this is a quote, during the boom phase of business cycles, which eventually go bust and result in credit contraction back to levels more in line with real savings. So we begin issuing a bunch of fiduciary media, a bunch of money substitutes. That leads to the boom phase, and then we have the bust phase when people realize this is not actually money, it's a substitute. During the boom phase, we have, as we all know, the illusion of prosperity, rising wages, production increases that tend to cater to future demand. So we begin like investing in things. We think people are going to buy a bunch of stuff and things are going well. In the bust phase, we realize, oh, the means of production are scarce, but money is not. We discover that savings are insufficient and people try to redeem this money substitutes they have, the fiduciary media, for real money, for real things. And we see that capital was wasted on half-finished projects and unprofitable ventures. So then you have that boom and bust, and then the central banks intervene to prop up demand, and we end with a general rise in prices and a devaluation of savings. And this devaluation is not equal. This is, of course, key lore for Bitcoiners, something I learned as I got more into Bitcoin. One of the key concepts: the politically connected are the best able to protect themselves in any bust phase of a cycle, of any boom phase as well, as situated to monopolize on it, through what is called the Cantillon effect. This is a really good summary of the Cantillon effect from this essay I'm going to quote here. So here's our vocabulary words, I think, which kind of give us a good understanding of where we're going with this essay so far, which is money substitutes instead of real money. And then we get boom bust cycles, and the Cantillon effects jumps in to reward political entrepreneurs who are closest to the money printer. The key point, here's a good quote that helps us kind of understand this all in one sentence. Money cannot be a superposition of present and future goods and be used by several parties at once without creating a business cycle. Rehypothecation is exactly what does that, though. So rehypothecation leads to fiduciary media or money substitutes. But what is real money then? Real money is defined in this essay as, quote, scarce money that functions as a rival good. So rival good's kind of a technical concept in there. And it's just like, really, rival good is just the opposite of fiduciary media, or of rehypothecation. Being a rival good means that, unlike a rehypothecation, or maybe unlike something abstract like an idea, it can only be in one place at one time. A rival good is in one place at one time. It's not rehypothecated in multiple places. Money must be a rival good. Real money, that is, must be a rival good, or else it leads to limitless credit expansion. And who loves limitless credit expansion? Debtors do, because it devalues the debts that they have. And who is the biggest debtor? The state. So historically, commodity monies like gold, which are real money, it's scarce and it's a rival good, gold can only be physically in one place at one time, are replaced by imposed fiat currencies. Fiat currencies themselves are actually also, in their kind of most benign state, rival. They're not scarce, but they're at least rival goods because of fiat dollar. I mean, the physical thing can only be in one place, even though you can print infinity dollars. So, but in any case, so commodity monies like gold historically replaced by fiat currencies because commodity monies place limits on government spending. They have a hard physical cap on being a rival good, and they place limits on government spending and growth of industry and trade. Bitcoin is, I misspoke there. So commodity monies don't necessarily place limits on growth of industry and trade themselves. We're going to go a bit more into how credit aids in that. But in any case, Bitcoin is a technological solution, according to this essay, to the problems of rehypothecation and fiduciary media in a way that gold is not. So I'm glossing over quite a bit. So I want to say too, fiduciary media, I've kind of said, like money substitutes, I've kind of framed it as necessarily a bad thing, but it can also be not necessarily evil, just a way to increase liquidity by using a substitute for money, introducing that also into the monetary system. But in any case, Bitcoin has certain technological aspects that make it different than gold in a way that can't be co-opted and then rehypothecated or turned into a fiduciary media so easily. So Bitcoin is a currency that is an absolutely scarce rival good. it can scale its transaction throughput, and it has its own transaction rails included. And that's kind of a key point. The problem with gold is it's hard to move around. But imagine if gold, of course, had its own manner of transaction included in the substance of gold, which is what Bitcoin ontologically does. It is its own ledger and protocol. Bitcoin's properties then allow for at least three important things in the context of this essay. So the first thing, again, as I started off at the beginning, like this author thinks that like figuring out the problem of credit's one of the key problems for, not problem, one of the key things that Bitcoin needs to do and is going to do. And so one of the three important things in the context of this essay that Bitcoin does is still allows for the issuance of short-term credit instruments. This essay is not anti-credit, it's kind of anti-fiduciary media, which is endlessly rehypothecated credit in the form of money substitutes. Credit instruments on top of Bitcoin is something that can actually help and address like scaling problems with limited block size on the Bitcoin network. It also addresses the need for credit in an economic system, which is, as I noted at the beginning, allowing real savings to be transferred in money terms to the highest bidding entrepreneur capitalist. This essay does go into depth technically into how to do a Bitcoin bill of exchange. That's a little bit too much for this summary. Maybe we'll talk about it in the discussion. I'll kind of quote a bit on that just so you get a gist of what that idea of a Bitcoin bill exchange means, though. Because Bitcoin bill creation simply reflects a transfer of Bitcoin, its contribution to credit expansion is nil. Such bills are real credit. They grant the holder a future good, a claim to Bitcoin on the maturity date. In this way, the pool of saved Bitcoin, real savings, is distributed to the highest bidding entrepreneur for production. That's a capsule summary of what a Bitcoin bill of exchange can do. And again, this essay does go into the technical aspects of how those would be crafted a bit more. Bitcoin allows for three important things in the context of this essay. The first thing, it still allows for the issuance of short-term credit. The second thing, Bitcoin is resistant to the issuance of fiduciary media. Again, fiduciary media are bad because it's rehypothecated money substitute, not backed one-to-one, not scarce, not a rival good, which leads to credit expansion and then a boom-bust business cycle. Bitcoin, though, can allow for issuance of credit, but also resist the rehypothecation being in more than one place at the same time that leads to fiduciary media. How? Just the inherent technical aspects of Bitcoin. Bitcoin transactions preclude the opaque chains of rehypothecation to which most near monies today are subject and which create hidden leverage throughout the global financial system. Bitcoin is just transparent. You can trace what's happening with each Satoshi, and so it resists being in more than one place at one time. You can go back and see the place the thing actually is, the unique location of each unit. So three important things that Bitcoin does in the context of this essay: still allows for short-term credit, is resistant to the issuance of fiduciary media, and then third, Bitcoin has capture-resistant properties that help it avoid the fate of physical commodity monies and transforming into fiat and being endlessly rehypothecated. So fiat money occurs when institutions suspend redemption of commodity money. But Bitcoin comes with its own transaction rails included. So unlike gold, which, once you centralize the control of that, everybody puts it in, a bank that's held by certain third parties, the government can then step in and say, we're not going to let you take any of the gold out. Bitcoin is a little bit different because it has its own transaction rails included. Quote, unlike all physical commodity monies, Bitcoin comes integrated with the means for transferring balances, a digital protocol that manages a digital ledger. This is by design. Bitcoin is an uncensorable and permissionless protocol built with the express purpose of enabling individuals to be their own banks, to make their own payments and store their own money holdings directly without relying on third parties. So Bitcoin allows for easy self-custody, and this hopefully the thought is going to allow for large amounts of Bitcoin to be held by individuals and not held by third-party custodians, therefore kind of resisting the suspension of commodity money that has happened in the past, the suspension of the redemption of commodity monies when the governments want to impose fiat. So if people are their own custodians, this will also then have the natural effects of diminishing kind of bank reserves over time, and so lead to the less creation of loaned out, rehypothecated fiduciary media monetary substitutes. The three important things then that Bitcoin does in the context of this essay still allows for short-term credit, is resistant to issuance of fiduciary media money substitutes, and three, has capture-resistant properties that help it avoid the fate of physical commodity monies in transforming into fiat and being endlessly rehypothecated. That gets, I think, kind of most of the main concepts of the essay out onto the table. As I noted, I omitted a lot of the really technical heavy lifting on the Austrian view of money. There's a whole chart here. I'm pulling up to the camera. If you're listening, you don't see it, about Mises' taxonomy of money. It's really interesting, but it's kind of hard to explain in a neat summary. I'll just conclude then, I think, with this is the penultimate paragraph of the essay. It kind of does a good job of summarizing the essay itself. The potential to improve the workings of a global money economy by structurally suppressing the issuance of fiduciary media in a way that has become nearly impossible using legislative or political means. This holds open the possibility of dampening the effects of vast economic discoordination that leads to boom and bust cycles or business cycles in this way. Bitcoin is posed to facilitate human cooperation in complex production without the state. While no monetary utopia will appear as a result of Bitcoin adoption, the systematic perturbations created by limitless injections of fiduciary media into markets will no longer produce the malignant incentives that debase real savings and kill entrepreneurial initiative over time. This will indeed constitute a new paradigm for political economy, although that paradigm is old as well: a small public sector and real rapid growth. So that's my summary of Bitcoin and credit. I apologize, Jack Watt. I'm a more humanities-centered person. Some of this is foreign language to me, but that's the best I got. Lucas, what do you think, man? I think this essay is fantastic. Again, any limitations in my summary are personal failures of myself as a human being and not due to the essay. I mean, what do you want to add or take away or just exit the room politely on?
No, I want to dig in. Yeah, I think you did a good job with the summary, and I kind of want to, I'd like to maybe add a little color and maybe some examples to these terms that have been introduced, rehypothecation, fiduciary media, maybe dig in a little bit on really why it is so important that a commodity, or why it is so special that there now exists a commodity money that is capture resistant. So I think those are all really fascinating. The first one I want to talk about is like the rehypothecation, which is just, money existing in two places at once. And I think the first place that you start when you want to talk about that, which is there will be people listening to this podcast who do not realize that when they look at their bank account and it says $2,000, there is not $2,000 there. That money does not exist. What you're seeing, yeah, blow your mind, right? All right, just right. Wait till you hear about the dark side of the moon and how hollow it is. But yeah, so that money doesn't exist. Banks keep track of how much you've deposited, and they keep track of how much they owe you, but they have what's called an IOU, right? They don't actually have that money. What they do is they take the $1,000 that you put in, and then they in turn lend out $9,000 against that $1,000. That's what fractional reserve banking allows you to do, is basically you're making a educated bet. You're taking the risk and you're saying that we don't have enough money to pay everyone who has given us their money, but we're counting on not all of them asking for it at the same time.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was cool is like making clear that rehypothecation is different, right, than fractional reserve banking. So fractional reserve banking, when it's malignant, malicious, relies on rehypothecation because there is the assumption that the money is both in the account and also somewhere at the same time. But you could have fractional reserve bank where people are completely aware and it's transparent that the money is not in the account and that it is being loaned out and that it's not accessible, that it's not rehypothecated. People don't rely on it being in the account, right? And so like this essay, I mean, the
Maybe
bad thing is rehypothecation. It's not necessarily, I mean, I think fractional reserve banking will tend towards rehypothecation, at least psychologically, because people will think the money is there. But maybe Bitcoin's transparency will make people more force them into the realization that my money is not in the bank. I gave it to them. It's being loaned out. I'm aware of that. It's rehypothecated, or it's not. I mean, it's fractionally reserved, but I know like I'm relying on the interest coming in as kind of compensation for that fact, and I'm fine with it.
I don't know if anybody's ever been honest about it. So I guess like, yeah, I mean, not too long ago, I was reading, I don't know where I was reading this, but I was reading a story about how like I think it was the 1800s, that was a very wide open time for banking. Like there weren't a whole lot of banking regulations, and you had what were known as the wildcat banks, which would just be like effectively like private enterprises, that, I mean, most banks are private enterprises, but private enterprises that they're like, hey, we've got some money. Here's our reserves. We're going to start a bank, and you
Yeah.
can make loans and deposit. And a lot of them would have their own money, like literally their own currency. And then, every once in a while, maybe some regulator would come and like check the reserves. And this was like, they had physical reserves, they have gold reserves. And so, they've got, say, 3 branches in 3 different towns. And, so what they would do is they would take all the gold and they would put it at this bank, and they would walk the regulator through, and he would look at it and then be like, oh, okay, you know what, we're going to take you to lunch, and then we'll take you to the next bank. And while they were taking him to lunch, they would take all the gold and they would take it to the next bank so that he could go verify that that also had reserves. It was just the same gold being moved around. It's fun because that's an actual example of a physical commodity that in effect is being rehypothecated. As far as the regulator knows, it's in 2 places at once.
Yeah.
Or I guess not as far as he knows. As far as he knows, they have the gold.
Stone Age
Yeah. Wow.
rehypothecation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's acting as two things at once. The thing that I find that is like the most kind of like mind-blowing, interesting takeaway from this is so we talked about this last week with a group, and Austrian economics has come to the realization by observing history that money is naturally chosen by people as the thing that holds the value the best. Even today, money is not what governments tell us it is. Like people use money substitutes in order to get best value held. They put their money into real estate as a store of value. They put their money into growth stocks as a store of value, et cetera, et cetera. But when money was a commodity, starting with stones and seashells and tobacco and salt and cattle, et cetera, you had progressively, it went from this type of money to the next type of money. And each time it went to a different type of money, the thing that was different was that money was, as they say, harder. It was
Hmm.
more scarce. It was
Yeah.
more difficult to replicate. And you think about it, it's actually kind of fascinating, I think, to consider like, it's not just how hard it is to replicate, it's also the predictability of the issuance schedule.
Yeah.
And in that matter, cattle are actually probably a more predictable money than gold, because you can never predict when you're going to hit the next mother load.
Hmm.
But you do know that you put a boy cow and a girl cow together, and 9 months later, you get another cow.
Boy cow. Tell me
Yeah.
again how it works out, Lucas.
I'm trying to bring it to the people where they're at.
This is just to put an asterisk here. This is a phenomenal and condensed explanation of Austrian economic theory. I'm very much enjoying. Continue.
Yeah. So anyways, so what you had was that commodity money, it progresses from easy to hard. But what you find when it gets to the hard, which is gold, when it got to hard money, that money was also heavy because gold is heavy. And
Yeah.
it turns out that it's difficult to move around, and it's difficult to verify. It's, you have to melt it down, and it's difficult to cut apart and put back together, and all of these other problems that come with gold being gold. And like you mentioned, and like Jack So like very well pointed out, there is no gold network. Like there's a Bitcoin network
Yeah,
where you take Bitcoin from here and you put it there and it moves along its own path. It doesn't have to exit the system or anything
yeah.
like that, but there's no gold network. You have to physically take it along infrastructure. Like the gold network is roads and it's trains and it's
And it's
airplanes.
humans and banks and malevolent actors, and yeah, all these
Yes.
things are part of the
Yeah, so
network of gold.
there's just more points of failure, right?
Yes.
There's just more opportunities, there's more variables at play.
Bandits on the road, bandits at the banks, for sure. The transaction rails of gold is much more error laden. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One of them wears masks, one of them should.
Yeah.
Um,
One of them started
yeah,
wearing masks after COVID, right? And we know
exactly.
we have
Yeah,
two
they're
mask
like, "Hey."
bandits. Yeah.
I was reading something about how, like, it became awfully convenient to be a robber after COVID.
Yeah, they just never transitioned out of COVID. They're like, okay.
Everybody just was dressed the part.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, so you've got so this is the problem with commodity money that led to fiat. You had commodity money that got harder and harder and harder until it got so hard that it was too heavy to actually use. You can't really use gold day to
Yeah.
day. It's just too inconvenient. And so there was a natural consequence to that. If we can't use it, what we'll do is we'll put it all in one place and then we'll pass around something that is good as gold. And we'll say that you can do this because it's way more convenient. And that'll be faster. It'll be safer. It'll be cheaper. It'll be blah, blah, blah. But of course it leaves open the possibility of a moral hazard. And the moral hazard is always that, hey, I have this much gold and that allows me to issue this many notes. I'm going to say that one note is 1 ounce and I have 10 ounces. So I issue 10 notes. And then
Yeah.
just like with fractional reserve banking, you're like, well, I mean, because that's all that it is. It's just fractional reserve money
Yeah.
where they're like, well, not everybody's going to ask for their gold back at the same time. So we can make another 10 notes and then we
Yeah.
can make another. And then it's like the thing that I think escapes the imagination of most people is that because the human brain thinks linearly and it does not think exponentially, it is impossible to comprehend just how far beyond any sort of rationale that let's print some more has gone. Like
Yeah.
the idea of a trillion of anything is just
It's like a
you can't
jillion. It's just a made
yeah,
up
I
thing.
mean,
Yeah.
it's just everything, right? I
You're
think
right.
it's like $1 million. Somebody, I hope, will correct me, but I think like $1 million is like 4.3 feet tall. If it's like $100 bills, a
Right.
stack of a million, and $1 billion is like a little longer than a football field. It's like 400 and some feet,
Okay.
and $1 trillion is like to the moon.
Okay.
So like
Yeah.
this idea of exponentiality that comes into play where you're like, oh, okay, $1 million, it's up to my
Yeah.
chest. I can get that.
Right.
$1 billion, it fits inside Bill Snyder Family Stadium. I can get that. But then going to the moon, like,
Yeah. When a fiat currency moons, it's not a good thing. Like
yeah,
it's a reverse statement of value. No, no, literally the currency is going to the moon. The pile of it is that high. Yeah.
to the moon and back. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Not
So
value. It's physically the
yeah,
substance of it. Yeah.
I
I
don't
think
know. Yeah. So that's what I think about it, I guess.
well,
Back to
I
you.
really like my favorite parts in the essay are what you mentioned too. I mean, this is something I kind of, I guess, unconsciously or maybe consciously, but not articulately acknowledged is that Bitcoin has its own transaction rails included. And
Yeah.
that like this essay kind of reduces it in my mind to like the hard physics of the situation. Rehypothecation, these really abstract Latin words are tough for us to get our mind on. Orwell said he has an essay, Politics in the English Language. Don't use this type of word because no one's going to understand what the F you're saying. It's not good. Use more concrete things. Rehypothecation, something can't be in two places at the same time. It's simple. If you just think about it like that, like the physics of it, you can't have an apple in two places at the same time. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Like that's just the hard physics of reality. rehypothecation, violates physics in that way. Gold is a physical substance. It abides by the laws of physics. Digital gold, Bitcoin, also abides by the
Abides by the
laws of
law of
physics.
physics.
Exactly. Like this is just like
Crazy.
a physical, a physics problem here or something like that. Like when you think about it in that way, rehypothecation, again, not as something abstract, but just something can't be in two places at the same time. Bitcoin also can't be in two places at the same time. It has a system built into it for verifying that that is the case, and also has its own transaction rails built into that substance too, so that it can move around again in a way that gold can't. It is only the substance that can't be in two places at the same time. It is not also the means of moving that substance about, which relies on human actors and actors that benefit from multiplying it through complex sounding words like rehypothecation. You just rehypothecated it. That's fine. I know what you mean by that. Surely, go ahead and do that, banker. And then they do that thing and nobody knows what it means. It's like, you know, if you have some word to justify doing something, make it complex and abstract sounding so people don't understand. It's just, trying to multiply something that can't be multiplied by creating a ghost version of it. But yeah, I really love just the vocabulary of this essay. We didn't talk necessarily about fiduciary media, just this idea of money substitutes. There are things that are money. There are things that we use as a substitute for money, these units in our bank account that we move around, but they're not money. No, they're not. They're just substitutes that we use as a type of liquidity to enable us to do transactions that might have a certain function. But again, they're not money. They're just things we use as substitutes for money.
Yeah. So the Bitcoin blockchain is a ledger that is just an accounting of every Bitcoin. Where is it at? It's either in a wallet or it's hidden in time, and it will come and be part of the Bitcoin blockchain at a certain time. And every 8 to 10 minutes, that gets validated and verified again with accuracy and precision. So at any given time, you can know with absolute certainty where every single Bitcoin is. And it can only be in one place. It can only be in this wallet or that wallet, or it can be not yet issued, but waiting in the future. It can only be in those places. And we know that with absolute certainty. Like anyone who runs a node can verify that. And with a fiat network or even a gold network, gold's in a safe. Like, how do you know what's in the safe? Like, you have
Yeah.
to go look into the safe, and you're not going to go look into the safe every 10 minutes and go, hey, it's still here. Here's how much it is. I just weighed it again. And with with the fiat network, with the monetary network of dollars and yin and yang and yuan, and I don't think there's a yang actually. I think I made that one up. Then with that, no one knows where any of the money is. Like,
Yeah.
because it's really just genuinely not. It just genuinely does not exist, and
Yeah.
it we even acknowledge that. Like, you acknowledge that in like, if there's a bankruptcy, there is an established order of creditors where it's like, when what happens when a bankruptcy occurs? A bankruptcy occurs because someone has been able to somehow, they have been able to owe more money than they have to pay it.
Yeah.
And there are people who have multiple claims on the money that they do have.
Yeah.
And bankruptcy filings show who gets to stand in line first, who's a
Right.
preferred creditor and who's a common creditor. And it's like, it's such a common problem that we have a legal system built around telling people where they get to stand in line when inevitably it occurs that the money which is supposed to be there is not there. Like,
Yeah.
it's such an often occurrence that we have an entire branch of law dedicated to it.
Yeah, but I don't think like bankruptcy law goes away with Bitcoin. If you still have any sort of notion of credit that exists, you're still gonna have
Be a
people
lot
that,
harder.
yeah, I mean, maybe it won't happen
It'd
as
be a lot
much.
harder because, like, yeah, like when I was banking, like, you would come to me and I would say, can't give you a loan until you give me some financials, and you would bring me 3 years of tax records, and then you would make a balance sheet for me, and that balance sheet would list your, your accounts and how much was in them, and it would list your assets and how much they were worth as written by you.
Yeah.
And little known fact, like, people don't check that shit. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you don't call around, like, nobody calls around and verifies how much money is actually in that bank account. Nobody, like, you will do, if it's a big enough thing, you'll go and you'll do an appraisal, but you don't do an appraisal because appraisals are expensive. Appraisals are expensive because they're an accreditation gated industry that exists solely to charge more money. Like, you only do an appraisal if it's a big enough loan that you feel like you need to justify it. By the
Mhm.
way, I lent money for 5 years. Only one time did I ever have an appraisal not come back where I wanted it to,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
as far as, like, being high enough.
Right.
And if it did come back and it wasn't high enough, I could always call the appraiser and I could be like, "Hey, I need more." And they would make it magically worth more. It's just like when you watch the movie The Big Short,
Yeah.
it's just like how the credit ratings agencies, there's 2 credit rating agencies. And if you bring one credit rating agency a bond and they want to rate it double A, you'll just say, "Well, screw you. I'll take it to the other guys. They'll rate it a triple A for the same price." And being an appraiser is just like that. I just wanted to go off on a rant about
No,
appraisers.
there's a key part of this essay that I think this is getting into the theme of, which is the author is not anti-credit. And so I left out of the summary, like his notion of how Bitcoin bills of exchange can be a short-term credit instrument that is going to economize transactions in a way that's good because Bitcoin doesn't have the throughput. We have like layer two solutions like Lightning, but another solution could be credit instruments that just take place in the land of human interactions and legal solutions and paper and whatnot. And he thinks that that's viable. And so his notion is, again, one of the key themes of the essay is like, here are the problems: rehypothecation leading to fiduciary meeting, leading to boom bust cycles. How does Bitcoin allow for a form of credit that gets around these problems? When one is like the nature of it, it's more transparent, so it's going to resist rehypothecation. People are going to be more eyes open. It's more capture resistant, so it's not going to um, lead to state capture at the bust part of the cycle. It'd be more resistant to that at least. And one part I had my notes here I wanted to get your take on is, you know, what is a Bitcoin bank going to look like? The author notes like Bitcoin banks have like they've been around since we've had exchanges selling Bitcoin essentially. And the idea from the early days, like Hal Finney noted the potential of Bitcoin banks to scale Bitcoin adoption. So it's not something completely foreign or paper Bitcoiny to say there might be Bitcoin banks. And he gives two models. One, the bank has its own ledger it uses to economize on uses of the base layer ledger. Quote, bank economizes on transaction using the Bitcoin base chain by creating accounts that hold database representations of the Bitcoin deposited by account holders and then registering transactions between accounts as database entries. I mean, it's like the oldest idea of like the old banker, in pre nation state Italy who just maintained the account of multiple merchants and did the internal ledger entries instead of making them all transact with each other's. That's one, it's maintaining their own ledger. Or two, banks mint eCash. Alternatively, a Bitcoin bank can take the form of an eCash mint that issues money substitutes as tokens that can be cryptographically tied to the Bitcoin deposited in the mint. So, what's your thoughts on Bitcoin, what a Bitcoin bank might look like, and or on the thoughts of Bitcoin banks as maintaining their own ledger, or Bitcoin banks as issuing their own currency, but it being cryptographically tied verifiably to Bitcoin eCash mint.
Yeah, the mechanism of how they do it, I'm not sure what's going to work out best. The first way that you describe really just sounds like you're funding a Lightning node where you're just going to
Mhm.
say, "Here's X amount of Bitcoin, and it's going to exist only within this node. It'll just be passed back and forth. It won't be broadcast to the system." The eCash thing, using where it would be linked to Bitcoin. That's kind of interesting. That makes a lot more sense, and it would resist rehypothecation. It would be a way to have a effectively kind of like fiat thing on top of Bitcoin.
And it goes back to your
Fiat
historical statement
fiat
of like
that's
those
actually
wildcat
tied to
banks.
what's that?
It goes back to your historical statement earlier that there used to be those independent banks that issued their own
Yeah.
currencies, right? Now it's just
Yeah,
they
yeah,
do it in a
yeah,
cryptographically verified way tied to Bitcoin.
yeah, yeah. I just so I think that'll be tried and I think it'll fail. And I just think it'll fail because mainly because of like Metcalfe's law. So like the value, is it Metcalfe's law? The value of the network is it grows exponentially with the size of the network.
Yeah.
And the size of the network is how many people will like accept that. And so I think it just makes a whole lot more sense to think about a like a one protocol type of solution, like a lightning or a cashew type of solution on top of Bitcoin, as opposed to individual banks that would issue theirs that would then be like, oh well, the Bank of Grant has issued their eCash and the Bank of Lucas will accept that, but the Bank of Grant won't accept the Bank of Lucas's, like it, and then like you got to do all this cross stuff, and then you create basically a forex type of foreign exchange type of like there would be a trading market for those currencies where they would be traded against each other. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
What I think actually most about though is not really so much about the mechanics of it. Like I said, I do think that it just moves to one protocol because it is more cost effective and there's more value in having a larger network. But what I find interesting to think about from the lending Bitcoin perspective is that the interest rate will. So the interest rate that we have now is just something that is set arbitrarily by people who are trying to make sure that the money keeps flowing. Because
Hmm.
if the money ever stops, then everything falls apart. Because if people decide to hold their money and save it and do that, then all of a sudden all of this lending collapses because there won't be interest to pay on the promises that have been made on money that's not there. If the interest rate went to 20%, the economy would utterly collapse because everyone would just hang on to their money and they would wait for that interest to be paid, but there's not going to be any economic activity generating interest because nobody's going to be taking loans. What I find really fascinating to think about is as Bitcoin matures, it will become a unit of account. So it's a store of value, right? You put your value in it, it stays there, it doesn't leak. It doesn't leak because you can't inflate the amount but you can't change the supply. And so that's the store value. And then you've got the medium of exchange, you can pass it between each other. That's cool. But it's also a unit of account. And it's not a unit of account yet because it's still, I would call it, I think we're out of the infancy stage. I think we're into the toddler stage. And I think, next will be a child,
Yeah.
as it starts to, but I still think we're, it's very, very young. But anyways, as it matures, when it reaches its full saturation, kind of like when I, as a human, was, 18 or whatever, and I reached my full height, and basically my frame was built. So when Bitcoin's frame is built, it then becomes a standard by which we measure value, much like the kilogram is how you measure weight, or the meter is how you measure distance. You can tell that I've been on the other side of the world for far too long because I'm not using English units anymore. But the thing about standard is that it cannot change. If it changes, then it's useless. Like I can't be 183 centimeters tall this year, not grow, and then next year be 300 centimeters tall.
Hmm.
But the money supply can definitely do that. Like the government will print
Yeah.
that much more money. When you print money, when you add money to the supply, when you inflate the monetary supply, it loses its value as a unit of measure. It's like taking a meter stick and putting more marks on it. And all of a sudden now you're 300 centimeters tall, and then you're a billion centimeters tall, and then you're 37 trillion centimeters tall.
Yeah. You could almost imagine that in like an Orwellian book about like a state being concerned that height distributions are unequal, and so they start inflating the height supply and making people taller. And there's like Cantillon effect too. Like some people get taller first, and
You
they
get
like
taller faster.
yeah, they get taller faster. They get the new They get the new units first or something like that. Yeah.
That would be fascinating because if that was the case, then it would be so much more obvious who is
Yeah.
part of the scam.
Yep.
Like right now, because people that are beneficiaries of the Cantillon effect, they walk around and nobody knows that they're the ones that are benefiting most from the money first because you can't see their bank account. But if they're walking around, you're like, that dude's like 45 feet tall.
Yesterday he was like 6 feet tall. Now he's
Is
45. It's
he a
something.
governor at the Fed? Is he a
That's
senator?
right.
Is that Nancy Pelosi's husband? But anyway, so to cap it off, what I think is really fascinating is that so all the money equals all the stuff, all the goods and services always equals all the money, regardless of how much money there is, because money is a unit of account that measures all of the goods and services. And so what are all the goods and services? All the goods and services are a representation of the time of people and the energy of people and technology. And so what you're going to see, I believe, is you will see an interest rate for Bitcoin that is a reflection and a barometer of the improvement that technology has upon society and humanity. Whereby if we enter a state where kind of where we're thinking now with AI and robotics that will be, say, 20% more efficient on a compounded basis year over year for, say, 20 years, then you're going to see that reflected in the buying power of Bitcoin because it'll grow, but it'll also become the natural interest rate where I'm not going to loan you my Bitcoin unless you return more Bitcoin than I loaned you.
Mhm.
And so that's the starter case. And then where we go from there is that you, as the person who wants to borrow the Bitcoin, you're going to bid to pay me as low of an interest rate as possible. Me, I'm going to try to get you to pay the highest interest rate.
Yeah.
And we'll meet somewhere. We'll meet somewhere, but we won't meet at 4%. We won't meet at 3%. We won't meet at 6%. We'll probably meet somewhere around the annual growth rate of Bitcoin, say 30%. And what that will do is that will mean that only people that are really serious and have a really good idea are going to go into business,
Right.
basically, because it's going to keep, there's going to be some moonshot guys that get lucky and figure out along the way that are going to get lost in the shuffle because they're never going to get a chance to compete if they're not taking cheap money out and just using it as a way to educate themselves by blowing it here and then learning a lesson.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really fascinating to think about. Like, you're gonna have to, this is like that second and third order effect of things is that in order to return that much, you're actually legitimately going to have to create something of value.
Mhm.
So it's not going to be Instagram. It's going to be teleportation. It's not going to be microwave food. It's going to be gene therapy, right? It's going to be something that is like massively impactful throughout all of humanity and is moving us in a more positive direction.
Yeah.
You just can't, it'll be in a positive direction.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm happy for it.
that's one of the ideas of the boom bust cycles. It leads to the misallocation of capital because people, they have infinite money and then they realize that the means of production are scarce. And then they scramble to invest in all these projects, to put their money somewhere. And then many of them are these ill-conceived ideas that are just misallocations of capital. Yeah.
When
So,
money is abundant, goods and services are scarce. When money is scarce, goods and services are abundant.
yeah. So yeah, nice. That's a good summary there. I don't know, man. This essay was difficult for me, like I said, just because the abstraction of just the bare idea of credit. I'm such a simpleton that is difficult for me. This essay, though, did a good idea of building that out, showing why it's necessary, showing how Bitcoin counteracts the worst aspects of credit issuance or what leads to kind of malevolent or malicious credit issuance, like rehypothecation, fiduciary media, how Bitcoin inherently tends to resist those phenomena. And so I definitely added to my understanding of what Bitcoin is. There's a lot of interesting stuff on Austrian economics that one could really geek out on if that was their thing that I kind of left out here. But even so, this essay really added a lot to my understanding and I appreciated it.
Yeah, I want to make sure before we leave, like, to throw out my understanding of credit. And like credit, just very simply, is that you are reaching into the future to pull wealth into the present because you want to make a bet, and the bet is equal to your the bet is the interest that you're paying. That's the size of the bet that you're making. And you're reaching into the future to pull wealth into the present, making a bet equal to the interest rate that at the point into the future will be worth what you're doing with it now will be worth more than it is today. And on an individual basis, that works wonderfully because there is responsibility, because you're betting on your own future. If I take a loan out to buy a house, then I am saying that find more value today in having this house than I do in not having it.
Mhm.
And I'm willing to work X amount and pay X amount in order to have that. What gets really dangerous and what Bitcoin disallows and makes effectively impossible is the situation that we have today, which is that governments reach into the future and they pull wealth from the future into the present, but it's not their wealth. Governments don't have, there's no such thing as government money. It's the people's money and it's the government taking it. And so when they are taking on debt, they are not doing it like the government should. In an ideal situation, the government should exist as a symbiotic organism. It should be the little fish that swims through the shark's teeth and it cleans the little stuff off of it. But what always happens, because they can control the money, is that they end up acting as a parasite and they end up being like a tick on the side or a barnacle and killing the host organism
Mhm.
by sucking the life out of them. And by reaching into the future, pulling this wealth into the present, what they're doing is they're taking something that's not theirs. It's the people's wealth, and it's the people's wealth into the future, and it's the people's wealth into the future that they did not give permission
Yeah.
for, that is then being drugged back into the present in order to feed this parasitical organism so that it can sustain itself while killing the host. And so
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's my understanding of credit is like you're reaching into the future, you're bringing it back into the present because you think that it's worth more today than it will be tomorrow. And that is absolutely the case with fiat money because fiat money becomes worth less over time because they
Yeah.
issue more of it over time. But I think you're going to see that credit is going to become a much more reasonable, like you will not see credit at the levels that we have today because absolutely the money is not worth less in the future. It's worth more in the future. So why would you sacrifice your future for your present? Yeah. Which
No,
is why everybody in Bitcoin gets in shape and talks about long time preference and all that, or low
yeah.
time preference.
And I
Yeah.
like in that definition too, acknowledging part of the bad part about credit is like the state's usage of it in a policy manner to reach into the future to fund like policy goals or whatever ends they have now. That reminds me of one of the interesting phrases I liked. This essay, very near the beginning, says that we're currently in an era of monetary policy and that Bitcoin is going to take us out of that. And I thought that's really interesting. Like Bitcoin is beyond policy. Like policy is like a human plan for how a system should play out that we impose through law. So we have monetary policy. That's the policy of the Fed. That's the policy of each new incoming administration. Bitcoin, has its own built-in hard programmed policy, and we can have policies around that. Like we can have policies around natural events and natural phenomena, but it's not the policy itself is not the money. And so we're going to exit the era of monetary
Yeah.
policy, enter the era of monetary substance or physicality or reality or something like that.
Yeah, it's more of a reflection. Like, it'll be a reflection of how your policies are actually working.
Yeah.
You'll see that represented in your buying power, which you do today, I guess, to a certain extent. Yeah. Hmm. I don't know. I dig it.
Right on, man.
Bitcoin credit. I think we're seeing, the debt instruments that are currently being issued on Bitcoin by the Bitcoin treasury
Yeah.
companies.
Yeah. This is
It's
timely, definitely.
Yeah, I've been trying to think. I don't know what you should call it. Like, it's not a speculative attack. Like, it would be a speculative attack if there was doubt. But since it's like a certain. I maybe you just call it a certain, but it's an attack with certainty on the global fiat system, coordinated by the private sector.
Yeah,
Because, like, I mean, why would you ever have a 4% bond, 2% bond? Why would you ever buy a T-bill that pays you 3%
yeah,
if you could get a Bitcoin bill that'll pay you 9, and if you want to, you can convert it into shares.
yeah. That's pretty funny. Like the Bitcoiner disagreement with the speculative attack is not the disagreement with the tack or the mechanics of it. It's the use of the word speculative.
I've been struggling with this for a week, trying to figure out what is the
What do you
proper
mean by
word.
speculative? I mean,
Like, but I keep telling it, so yeah, 4,000 government currencies have existed, 3,840 of them are gone, 160 of them are down 99%. Where's the doubt? Why would anyone doubt this? Yeah. Grant, I think you crushed it today.
I think you crushed it today,
I
Lucas.
think there's an alluring red tint to your hair that's coming off of wherever we're at. I'm
Are
not
you
quite
serious?
sure
Huh.
that it's looking auburn-esque, a bit sandy as
That's
well.
yeah, that's my recording
Yeah,
studio is like harsh fluorescent light or something like that. We do it very professionally here is how we do this thing. So
good,
make
good.
ourselves
The
look good.
mustache is
You're looking
the
awfully red
mustache.
today. Like, yeah, that's our standards of podcasting and video casting is like,
I've got a cool hat.
there we go.
The mustache is looking very highway trooper slash almost
I was
pedophilic.
gonna say, don't go there. Let's stop at Highway Trooper.
Yeah.
That's more the. I mean,
All right. All right.
in
We'll
this
get
day
out
and
of it
age,
here.
and any mustache is obviously aspirational to that one character in Sicario who had the mustache. I forget his name, but he's like, I mean, you watch it, you know.
It's wait, it's not Josh Brolin's
No, it's
character.
not his
It's
character. It's his like it's his friend or whatever. His other guy who's
yeah,
in the special forces
yeah,
there.
it's the guy from the show White Collar, Donovan,
That's
something
it.
Donovan.
Yeah, that's it.
Jeffrey Donovan.
Yeah,
Jeffrey Donovan.
yeah. So,
Yeah. I like it. You're way more buff than him.
well, he's got the operator frame. The operator frame is
He
leaner
does.
because you don't need like hypertrophy is bad for the operator. That's the point that Pavel Tsatsouline makes in his like kettlebell manifesto. And like, you know, the operator is not someone who needs mass. They need like ability to operate. So yeah,
Nice. Nice. Well, what do you say? We put
that's
a
it,
bow on
man.
this one?
I think we did it. You ended up with a cowboy hat on, and I ended up just basked in red light for whatever reason. So we did okay.
Great place to be. We'll do
Yeah.
it again.
All right,
See ya.
man.